Welcome to the Super Gamer Podcast. Welcome to the new Super Gamer Podcast, episode 147. Our guest this week is an award-winning composer and technical audio engineer, designer, streamer, speaker, a retro refurbisher. We have Chase Bethea. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'll just quickly run down. This is not an exhaustive list, but games you have shipped that you've done music and sound for. Potions Please, Aground, Deity Quest, Super Happy Fun Block, I Can't Escape, Not a Clone, Cubic Climber, Electron Flux, etc. You won Best Original Soundtrack for Aground. That's the NYX Award. You know, how did that feel?
It felt tremendous. It was. I remember getting the email and when Nick says that you are a winner. I couldn't believe it because I've been nominated before for the score for I Can't Escape Darkness and by VGMO, Video Game Music Online, alongside other people in the industry, like the entire industry, from Japanese composers to European composers to the United States composers and Brazilian composers as well, or South American, excuse me. And so it was that feeling, but then enhanced because I actually won, and I couldn't believe it. I think I had applied to other awards earlier in the year. I think I applied for a BAFTA and a couple other award organizations, but yeah, I won the Nix Award, and I'm looking at it now as I'm talking about it, and I'm still in disbelief. But it reminds me that it can happen.
Is there, obviously, you must know you're doing something right. I mean, you've worked on so many games, people keep hiring you. But when you get an award like that, what does it tell you as far as your work?
So it tells me that I'm actually going to do a little bit of a small anecdote. So it was when I was quote campaigning for submitting for the award, I was told by a few people that it doesn't really matter, and I started to kind of believe that a little bit. But when I won, and the response that I have received, I put it out there that I won, and then I did a photo and an announcement video, and it was for me. I realized it was for me to it's sort of a self-validation that I've given myself. But what I did see on the outside is that from posting, the post was for me to kind of like bookmark that. But a lot of people cared, and they really received it. They were happy. They were really elated that I won an award. And what it showed me is that what I had heard from the outside before even receiving the award, or while I was campaigning about it didn't matter, is that it actually does. It does matter to some people, or rather a lot of people, that seeing someone like me win the award is a sense that it gives them inspiration. It gives them joy. It gives them happiness too. It does something externally. It's not just, oh, cool, yeah, you got it. It's something else that happens. It's some kind of positive energy that really is propelled. And I felt good knowing that it wasn't just for me, and that other people were, yes, it's happy to be received too, but it was a lot of great responses. Well-deserved. Congratulations. Best wishes from so many people. And I was very humbled. On top of which,
you were a guest at MagFest just earlier this month.
Yes.
And I have to know, how did you do in trivia?
I love it. I didn't do as good as I should have, and I'm not beating myself up about it, but I at least know I got GoldenEye, and I have to pat myself on the back for that one.
Was it all guessing the track, or what was it?
No, so the game itself was so well done, and being on that panel with the other folks on there was really great. But it wasn't all game tracks. in what it was a little bit of game playing, and then there was a random trivia question that had nothing to do with music. But what happened is that you had to play this controller to go through this type of Doom or Quake map to get to the mini game, which was either guess this video game music or trivia, or gonna play a game on the side 1v1 or 2v2 to gain points for your team. And so when you go through the map, you encounter this enemy, and that enemy brings up that random type of minigame. And yeah, then that would be the track music that we got. And I'm going to give myself a little bit of credit. I did guess 2 of the games, but ironically, the game music that, of course, Murphy's Law would have it, is that there were games I haven't got to play just yet. I haven't got around to playing them. And even though they're old, even though that other people have played them in their time, I haven't had a chance to play some of these games. And I'm almost scared to say what they are because I'm feeling inflamed. But I'm going to just be transparent because I believe me, honest. But it was Mass Effect, and some of them was Donkey Kong Country and Kingdom Hearts. Now, not to say I have actually played Kingdom Hearts, I just haven't beat it. It's not my type of game. I have played Mass Effect 3, but I didn't continue. And I have played Donkey Kong Country, but it was many, many eons ago at a friend's house. So it was not games that I finished. It's just that I didn't become acclimated with the music. And so that's where I think the hang up would be. But it just so happened, like I was saying, I didn't play them. I didn't finish the music to be absorbed by it and get that. On top of which, we didn't win to do this big one, this music thing, and so the music was all the music sound startups for every console from retro to modern.
Oh, that's a cool one.
And it was but they were all a cappella, and really good a cappella. I don't know if it was Smooth Groove or whoever, but they were lush and they were great. And so that was the ending one, and I know I did better on that one, but yeah, overall it was really cool. And it was kind of hard to hear too. It was an open room, but yes, you have to tell the audience to be quiet. But I didn't feel so bad because there were other players up there with me, and I thought since Kingdom Hearts, Donkey Kong Country, Mass Effect, if I didn't play them, at least the other 2 members had at least played them, but everybody was kind of struggling.
Well, to be fair, I have never played a Mass Effect, and I have never played a Kingdom Hearts. So
okay.
Yeah, and that's, as you said, it's not a knock on either of them, just haven't really got around to it. Donkey Kong Country, however, I grew up, I believe you grew up more with the Genesis. I grew up with a Super Nintendo, and I love Donkey Kong Country.
Yes, yeah. See, I had a Sega more, and if I got around to a Super Nintendo, it was it was luck that I got to their house, and then it was luck that they had it where I could play it.
Right. It was exactly the opposite. Yeah, exactly. You'd go to a friend's house, and it's like, oh, you have a Genesis. Oh.
Yeah, you're like, whoa, I don't want to leave your house.
What was your favorite part of the whole MagFest?
I think my favorite part was, it's going to sound probably really boring, but being there and absorbing the energy. And actually, now that I'm remembering something that's very cool, so it took me about 10 years I've been trying to go for 10 years, and so to my first MagFest, I was brought out as a guest, and they do this sound where I call it like the power up sound. It's probably not even what it's called, but it sounds like the power up sound. They go, and so while we were having technical difficulties on that versus game panel, I just end up grabbing the mic. I thought about it for about a minute, and I thought, okay, if I hear an opportunity of a break, I think I'm just going to take it. And so I just end up just instinctively, totally spontaneous, grab the mic and say, hey, this is my first MagFest. I really love you, the community. It's really awesome to be up here. And really, it's my 12th year in the industry, and so I've been trying to come here for a while, but I'd really love if y'all could do me a favor and just do this sound with me. And so I got the entire room to do the sound with me. It felt amazing. And I have to say that part just, I'll never forget it. It was really, really cool.
That's awesome, yeah. So we actually connected because you were asking on Twitter, and I wanted to clarify because I wasn't quite sure. You were asking if there was some sort of like interview format of journalists covering, was it the whole VGM scene or specifically MagFest, or what were you asking?
Yeah, Mark, I love your questions. I'm telling you, I'm smiling hard. the I was asking if there were journalists that cover video game composers and work that comes out, because when I started early in my career, there was places like sound original sound version and VGMO online, and well, VGMO is online, but Video Game Music Online, and a couple others. And there was one actually not too long ago, one of them say like 2 or something years ago, where they would announce like, hey, this person's got a new soundtrack out or something like that. And I haven't seen much of that since, in terms of like a centralized like website where people can go and then keep up. Someone mentioned Game Grooves, but Game Grooves kind of does that, and they do reviews, but I noticed that they're kind of more focused on video game music remixers versus, and mostly composers from, obviously the veteran composers were Japanese composers in that time, in that era, to up to composers like me, who work on a lot of independent games, and AAA composers. AAA composers get a lot of press. And you can't miss that stuff, really. But so it's mostly just an amalgamation of, hey, these people and these artists are releasing, there's a new soundtrack out, or they're performing here, or whatever the news is, this person won the award, and just updates and things like that too. I haven't seen that, and I really wish to see that more.
Well, it just occurs to me that I probably should have looked for that before this interview, to maybe be like, well, here is one. I didn't do that, so I apologize.
Oh, no apology needed. But the question alone is it makes me happy that you even asked, because I think it really just brings more cognizance to the scene. And I got a lot of great responses, and like, here you are, we're having this chat, so I'm super thankful I put that out there.
Yeah, and I mean, I know Nudge was the one from VGM Together and other things, was the one who connected us, but certainly I do want to shout out, it's again, it's not just like this show, it's not quite what you were asking for, but VGM Together is certainly an event that celebrates the VGM scene and composers and all that. So
yeah, I'm very familiar. The first one, I was contacted by Nudge, and so I was part of, I think I submitted some trivia questions, some game music questions for them to use, and I was going to be a guest, but I don't think it ended up working out in terms of scheduling and things like that. But hopefully in the future I can be part of that again.
What did you mean when you say, this is a little out of context, so you might not even remember what you're talking about here, but what did you mean when you said you're a bit of a game whisperer? I can give you a bit of context if you need it.
I know exactly.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So when I said that, what I meant was I'm able to play almost any game and to determine what kind of music typically the game is asking for. So if it's an early build of a game, most like, and this is where I'm coming from, obviously ship games, they have their sonic identity that's attached to it. It's really that my mind is, it's very rare my mind is saying, no, this music doesn't work for this game. That doesn't happen too often, but what I'm speaking from is if I'm into playing a game that doesn't have any music yet, mostly projects that are coming my way, I can hear the texture and the sound and the sonic identity that I think will fit best to match that game.
Right. So then, I guess kind of along those lines, you've spoken before about, and maybe you can speak about it again, the importance of including audio into your game production plans, like right from the start. And that's something I've heard about. Accessibility stands out to me. Before on the show, we talked about how if you want to have your game be accessible, that's not something you tack on at the end. It has to be right from the start. You're planning it. Evidently, you feel audio is the same. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I do. I strongly believe it's part of the same. There's some odd mindset that it should be at the end, and I never really understood that because I grew up understanding quality as a consumer, and so like in my my growing up with games for me, rarely did things break, and things were sound and out of context of using sound, but they were solid, right? And so the purpose, the only thing I can see is that, and remember, is the sound team and the composer, or plural composers, were part of the process a lot of the times from the beginning, because it was part of the design, along with the writing, along with the storyboarding and art and environment and level design and programming. Everything was in tandem. And for somewhere along the line, I'm not sure if it was like the early 2000s or something, things just started to separate, and it became a thought of, oh, we can have you on, but and I'm not sure if it's a budget thing. Most likely is that, oh, we'll have you on, but when we're ready, and it is excluding of that. So I'm thinking, well, why not the mindset of, if budget is the issue, to change it rather than seeing it as the end? Because there's so many things that happen in that by thinking that way, whereas in you're not even being respectful to the music designer overall, to be able to do the best work alongside, in juxtaposition with everything else. They have to rush, and I don't think that's really fair. And typically what that would do is just, it sounds like it would probably be more expensive because there's a rush. And so if I'm my thought process is, well, why wouldn't you just plan ahead to have that, even if it's not at the end, but to be midway? It doesn't even have to be at the beginning, but to be midway would be great. And I think, as I'm even saying Midway, I'm thinking of the game company Midway, which also worked on Mortal Kombat. And I'm thinking, and we're talking about accessibility, I heard a story about a blind person being able to finally beat their brother in Mortal Kombat after many years of practice because of the sound. And in Midway, in that time, I'm sure that they had a team and they were working on that project. Not at the end. I'm almost pretty sure not at the end. At least it was, in this case, it would be a pun, midway, or overall from the beginning of the production itself. And so I believe that it's just a mindset that I would love to educate and train and change. And I've been on this advocacy for 12 years now, and I'm going to always keep pushing for it if I can.
It also makes me think, I like the idea of a dev. I think it's obvious to think like, okay, while you're designing a game, like, okay, what's this going to look like? What's the player going to be doing here? But it's interesting to me to think of like, well, what's this going to sound like? Which I suppose is your job. So.
well, yeah, but see, that's when I realized I wanted to work in games, I took it upon myself to start learning everybody's role. And so I thought that was very important, to get into the mindset of how programmers think, how level designers think, animators, everything, all the credits and all the things of the core of what makes a game, all the arts combined. I thought it's important to at least sit down with them, maybe an hour, or go to their talks at Game Developers Conference and see how they're approaching, because the perspective will give at least me the understanding of how it all comes together, and then I feel like I'm able to at least speak alongside for feedback, if as a team, because I believe I'm part of that team. I don't feel like I'm off to the side coming in and maybe maybe I'm on the team or maybe I'm not. I thought it was very important to just kind of figure out what you're thinking like. And it's not that I was looking for any reciprocity there. I was looking to just be included.
Another interesting thing to me, in an article or an interview anyway with Shoutout LA from April of last year, you said, you mentioned sharing the musical story via a game. And the reason I find that interesting is because, like, I guess I kind of always thought of it the other way around, like you're using the music to help tell the game story. But do you feel there's a reverse to that? Like, or can you make it so as they're playing, they're understanding the music better? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a fine line, because I do still believe that the music is to enhance. But if I'm being completely honest, it's 50% of the experience for the game itself. If you play any game, my very first talk that I ever gave was sound breeds identity. And I use the example for Super Mario because everybody knows that. If you had that music, if you played that game and you turned it off and just played it on silent, your brain probably would think, if you played the game before and then you played the game without any sound or music, your brain would probably think, and there's something missing here, which shows that that's at least 50% of the experience. And so it's part of the entire collaborative art form, I believe still, but it's still a huge part of that art form that bridges it together. And my goal is to hopefully have it be subtle, but still recognizable so that it has that sonic identity. And that's how I believe I'm pushing for that amalgamation to be just almost transparent, but absorb. Well, it's supposed to be felt naturally. It's not supposed to stick out. It should just blend, hopefully, in that respect. So that's pretty much where I was thinking and I was coming from. Now, of course, if we're working on a rhythm game like Luminous Plus or Patapon or Beat Saber, then that's also, ironically, still, I believe, 50% of the game, if not maybe 60, because then you really have to listen to the music and get things together. Or Dance Dance Revolution would be another great example. So rhythm games typically might have a slight edge in the percentage versus any other genre that comes about in terms of the development. Unless there's a couple games I remember, if the sound is the mechanic, then, or the music is the mechanic, not in a rhythm format, that's something to be considered and might have a different percentage in terms of development ideals as well. As I think about this, Near Gestalt / Replicant is a perfect example. That music soundtrack was all created before the game was made, and the game was made around the soundtrack.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, that's why that music is so well just loved and felt, and it's incredible, and why I believe the game was a cult classic. And I'm so glad to see that it has taken off in its respect too, from the designer, and how more people, it's now not just a cult classic, but more of a popular type of IP.
Going way back, you started writing music in the 5th grade on Game Boy Camera, which I had to look up because the idea of a camera doesn't make me think of, making music. But was it? I guess there was an app, if you want to call it that, DJ. Is that what you were using?
Yes. And do you know how to get that? Do you know how to get to that?
I was reading up. It's I forget. I never had a Game Boy Camera, so.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to share. It's
sure,
really fun.
Please.
Really fun. So yeah, Game Boy Camera, the first selfie, by the way. I always say, and I had a green one, and when you play the game, if you don't have a Game Boy Camera, please go out and get one and at least experience this stuff, because there's so much. There was an album you can through. There's stickers. If you had the printer, you could print it out. When Blockbuster's around, you can actually print it out there, and you can make the printouts like stickers yourself and it'd be tangible. There was a juggling game. There was a run game where you have to run against a mole and a bird with your face doing all these little weird things, however you took the picture for. And there was, how can I say this? It was a Galaga type game. Or Space Invaders, but between the two was like Galaga and Space Invaders game. And so if you did really well on that game, first, if you go into the game, it's like a mini game, and on the left is the run game, I think, and on the right was the juggling game. And then if you did really well, you'd get the DJ you'd unlock the DJ mechanism. I think if it might be one of those. Maybe the run game was the question mark and the DJ, but I believe the DJ one was the one that if you got a high score, if you beat it, then you can unlock the DJ part. And so the DJ part was only just as you had your photo in there, or you took a picture of yourself, you do silly faces, and you're just supposed to do those squeaky, squeaky, squeaky. You do those spins and that, and it had the stock game music that was in there. But if you hit select, you go underneath the hood, and then you can actually customize your own tracks to do little wikis to and spins. And I discovered this, and I said, whoa. So I actually can make my own game music on this. And so I started just making my own music on there because it was using using 3 channels, because it had a noise channel, it had a square, and it had a triangle. So it wasn't the full Game Boy chip set, which is 4 channels, which is the 2A03 chip that the dot matrix would use. But still more than enough to make some really cool Game Boy soundtracks things to just do your little DJ spins and things to it. So I loved it, and I'm only scratching the surface for the things that you can do in there. There was just so much more. But yeah, that's really where I realized, hey, I'm actually writing game music on a Game Boy before LSDJ even came about.
Did you ever show it off to friends? Like, were they like, oh wow, you should have a concert?
Oh no, I don't think it. So I mean, in that era, right? This is '97. No, this is still PlayStation. I'm still playing N64. Super Nintendo is still pretty cool. Sega Genesis still has commercials too, but maybe they don't have commercials. But PlayStation is out, and 64 is the PlayStation 64 is it. And so Game Boy Camera comes along, and it just depends on. Well, it's taking a risk too, taking the Game Boy to school, because then if it gets taken away, you may never get that back, and that thing is expensive. I mean, I remember that Game Boy being $89, and then a game would be $20 or more. So you're looking at $110, $125, and that's nothing. That wasn't big money. That was a lot of money back. I mean, it wasn't a console like Super Nintendo, but still was a lot. So it wasn't ever. And then there was a lot of theft too. I mean, I grew up in Chicago. So if you had something that another child wanted, I mean, the only time you were ever really going to bring that thing is show and tell day, and maybe you do it. But if you want your Game Boy stolen or taken away from the teacher, you're not bringing it to school. And I wasn't trying to do that.
Game Boy Camera, that's where you started composing, but you also played alto sax. You sang in choir in school. And you actually, when you were getting into music as a career, like you were in school for it, like post-secondary school for it, video game composing wasn't really what you were after. But people kept telling you that your tracks sounded like gaming music. What does that even mean?
I am laughing because that's exactly what my brain said to me when I heard that from people. I was thinking, what does that mean? And I asked myself that for several years until it clicked that, oh, you really think that this should be in a video game? It's the most simplest thing sometimes just don't hit you. And if it was a few dozen snakes, it would have definitely bit me 20 times over. So I was doing a different style of music, which was hip hop and R&B, and I was really pushing for that. But I had, in a weird way, I was sampling game music, but I was also figuring out video game melodies and then incorporating them, but then adding like hip hop style drums behind them. And I was doing this in 2001 and 2002, and then continuing on up to like 2007. So in a way, I really was doing what is called nerdcore before nerdcore was titled that. And it just wasn't received by peers and others. They thought it was cool, but because it didn't sound like what other producers' music had sounded like, and obviously probably because I was using some of the melodies from games and other things, and not all the time, but it was mostly the instrumentation and the samples that I was using that tip them off of, well, this doesn't really sound like this. It sounds like a game instrument. But and so I'm obviously I'm educated enough now to break it down in terms of, well, this is where they were coming from. And you're using an instrument like this, an instrument like that, typically is attributed in the sonic form of sounding like this game or whatever they believe this is relatable to in their mind for this instrument from a game that they've played. So even if I was using a melody or sampling something from that to make that track or that piece, it still would have those elements that people would say, oh, this sounds like it should be in a video game. Now, when I totally did not do that and I got out of that type of genre music and I did pursue game music, but I also went to school and had to learn film music, every piece that I submitted for my class in film for class to be scored still told me that it sounds like video game music. So I never escaped it. It never escaped it. It doesn't matter what genre I got to. But by that time, when I was still in film class, I was already nominated for an award in the industry. That was the I Can Escape. So at that point, I was thinking, I'm never going to escape the sound. I'm just going to completely own it now. And so that's what really pushed it forward into terms, okay, well, we already decided we're going to do this. I know what I love in video game music. I know why I'm in school for this. I know what I want to bring to the table. And when I started accepting and acknowledging that that's what my signature sound has always been, I just decided to just refine it even more.
And one of the quotes you try to live by is from Don Draper in Mad Men. If you don't like what's being said, change the conversation. And I think this applies to while you were in school, you found it didn't have a video game club. Video games weren't really on their radar. So you started emailing departments and you got them to make one, essentially.
Yeah, I didn't get them to make one, but I was part of the inaugural one that I had stumbled upon. And what I related to is how the school that I was going to was huge. The campus was massive, and the music building was on one side of a block, and then maybe I would say almost, it felt like 15 blocks, but it probably was. It's only like maybe 6, but 6 blocks. It was still far. Like, is the other side of the campus where there's the art people, and that's where the club had originated. But I thought, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, games programming, and the programming department didn't have it. And so when I had emailed, they said, oh, actually the art department's making it. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, yeah, I can do that. I can live with that. That makes sense too. Art is still part of making games. And so a game designer, a veteran game designer that I ended up stumbling upon, made the club, and then finally got the club to be started. And it's ironic, it was called GDC, and so it always would trip me up, game development club, but game developers conference. And so that's how that was. But I was the first to find it because in the program for school, everyone was focused on being a film composer. And then you kind of hear, oh, I'd like to do game music, but it was this ethereal, mysterious enigma of how to get in and what to do. And then I come along, and I'm already in it. I'm already doing stuff. I've already released soundtracks. I'm just trying to refine the process of the music. And I'm thinking, well, why doesn't this exist? Like, why doesn't this exist? And so as I go looking for it, it wasn't my first semester it was my first semester I contacted the programmer teacher department, and then that's when they led me to understanding that the second semester the actual club was started. But I was actually the music liaison for folks in my class to be introduced to connect with other people who wanted to make games in the club, and got them involved in the first game jam at that school that I even participated as well, and told other people from the music department, hey, if you want to work in games, do game jams. They're going to have one. This club has it. Sign up. And I'm like, what? Wow, because game music is not being taught as a curriculum at all, and even a class in any type of collegiate form.
And I was
at least at that part. Yeah, sorry.
That's all good. I was just going to ask the importance of game jams for your career.
The beginning to current, I've always attributing and participating my portfolio to game jams. If I didn't have that, I I don't know how I would be working as a game composer, because I remember when I decided to get started, I thought that you had to be hired by a studio, but you had to have a lot of portfolio work. And so it's that whole catch-22. If you don't have work to show, you can't get the job. But if you also can't get the job if you don't have the experience. But I didn't have the experience, so I couldn't get the job. So it was just this another game to play and to fit in a puzzle piece to figure out within the game. But game jams are, I'm so thankful for them, because they're really great. They show you so much in a short amount of time. They show you strengths, they show you weaknesses, they build and start friendships. It's kind of backwards how I said it, but the point is that they start friendships, and hopefully those friendships get nurtured, and above all, you get the experience if nothing else, but then if something great comes out of it, you get a portfolio to use for the next leverage for entering another game jam, or possibly even work. Or if it's really good, it becomes a release game and becomes really good work and good commercial portfolio for leverage of the next one. And so there's just so many opportunities. And I'm thinking about the keynote that I gave for Global Game Jam last year. I talked about this mostly in terms of so many benefits of doing it, and I'm still a big advocate, and I feel now ambassador for game jams overall.
How has your mom helped you get where you are?
My mom is very integral in terms of the musical source and inspiration. She's always supported me in whatever I've wanted to do. I have a toy piano actually used for a game jam I've used before, and and other instruments like my recorder that I used on I Can't Escape Darkness. My mom got me this toy piano that I found out was made by a company that uses a similar chipset to the Yamaha chip that was used in I'm blanking for a second, in the NES, was very similar, and I would have never known that, but I ended up doing homework and I was like, what is this? Why do these drums sound so familiar? And my mom got me that as a toy. It is a toy, but I ended up using it as a music instrument. I've taken singing lessons from my mom in my adult years. She's just so great, and I'm even collaborating with her now on a few game soundtracks that I'm working on currently. So I'd have to say, she's just super well-rounded. Taught me about business, taught me about business in my adolescence, and taught me just how to just navigate the space of industry itself to the best of the abilities that she was able to share with me overall. And it's still part of, like I would say now, of my career in ways that are really cool.
Along the lines of that piano toy, there's a video. You appear to be playing a child's xylophone. And I was wondering, what's the weirdest instrument that you've used on an actual game soundtrack?
Ooh, yeah. The weirdest instrument I've used, I've got to think about. I'm going to go through my mind and think about them for just a second here, because one of them comes to mind, but I'm not sure how to describe it. Of course I would blank. The thing about when I'm doing so many soundtracks now, and as I'm using more live instruments, it's if I'm not looking at it, then I'm forgetting. I'm like, oh yeah, that one. Oh yeah, that one. Oh yeah, that one. The thing, and I think I'm having an issue answering the question is because I haven't used it yet. I've made it, but I haven't used it yet, and that's because I'm waiting to score a horror game so I can use it. But I don't want to give it away because I have a couple ideas. But when the game comes, when I get the horror game, I want to score for, and then when I use the instrument, and then I'll be able to share what that is and was and the idea behind that and all that stuff. So yeah, but I can't say the weirdest one I can answer right now.
All right. Well, I expect a tweet when that happens.
You got it. You got it. I'm gonna at you. I will at you so you know it's real.
You do work on multiple projects at once, though. Do you ever notice, like, does your tone from one project bleed into another?
It depends on the project and the developer. So right now, I can see a tone that I'm currently scoring a game called Stardander, and I can feel the tone is a little bit close to reality, which was the game that was released, I think, in 2016 of April. And I can see that, but I'm really careful about that not happening, because I'm always challenging myself to do something different. And it ends up taking longer and longer and longer, because I know that I'm pushing myself in that way. But I feel it's just justified, because I just don't want the player to be bored. I don't want people to turn the music off. I want it to be part of the entire art form. I also don't want to get caught up in, there's a big composer out there, I don't want to say his name, but when I heard that he recycled something from a different movie, I was like, oh hell no. Fuck that. So I really just believe in, okay, yes, you can recycle ideas, but don't make it so blatant. Like, make the listener look for some Easter eggs. Could you please? So yeah, I'm usually just trying to make it always, like I said, the sonic identity is really important to me. And so I feel if that game has that sonic identity, if you're playing something and someone else is in that, it comes in within your proximity of a space that they can hear it, they'll be able to identify what that game is without seeing any graphics at all.
And what about when you stream your writing process? Because that's a big part of what you do streaming. You kind of show people what you're doing while you compose, how you compose, all that. Can the performative part of streaming get in the way of the writing?
The performing part, are you talking about?
I guess I just mean like having to kind of be on, like having to engage with people, having to explain what you're doing. You know, is it ever sort of like, okay, I'd really like to just be writing right now?
Well, yeah, that's interesting, and I think if it did, I probably wouldn't stream, but what I found is that it doesn't, because I'm able to do it, and I was able to do it for several years and finish projects. In fact, it kept me, that's what it was. It kept me accountable, because I have an audience. So they're looking to see how it comes about and what it looks like from the beginning to the end, to the finished product of what it's going to be. And so what I found was my efficiency had increased tremendously, because I wasn't just taking the time that I needed to make it happen in that way. It was really, I have to be on, so we can't really just be sitting around fiddling too much. And I really appreciated that focus.
Did you ever finish reading The Complete Guide to Game Audio Second Edition by Aaron Marks? Because I know you read half of it as of 2021.
Yes, Mark, I did finish the book. I finished it, I believe, in 2015.
Oh, 2015.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I believe I finished the half of it, yes. And as I was thinking about it, I just was thinking about that book yesterday, and there's a chapter in there about awards, and I was thinking, okay, I know I've been mentioning a bunch, that's why I laughed so much, is that I know I've been mentioning a bunch about reading half the book, but I feel that about that chapter, that there's a couple more things I'd like to accomplish through the book of what I've read. I believe the mantra of applied knowledge is power, because usually people are like, knowledge is power. And I remember working with a friend, he was like, applied knowledge is power. And I was like, actually, that's definitely true. Because everything that I've read, I've applied in that book thus far. And so I feel like, as that being the last chapter, that will conclude the journey of that book in real time.
I was going to ask you about what makes Plock's soundtrack so good, Plock, an SNES game. But then I came across your top 50 video game soundtracks, something you wrote in 2016, and Plock isn't even on there.
Ah, yes. Yeah, it's not on there. And the reason it's not on there is because I didn't discover how great Plock was until I think just last year. So when I wrote that it was in uni, and that's when I said people had no idea about how to get into games. And then I asked them, I said, well, what's your favorite indie game? And they couldn't tell me. And I was like, oh, this is not good for you. And so they said, well, then they came back and they said later, it was like, hey, well, what's your favorite video game soundtrack? And I was like, I don't have one. And he said, well, give me 50 and I'm going to need them. I'm going to be on break. And I said, all right, cool. And then I gave it to him and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to write a blog about this because other people are going to probably ask me in the future, I'm pretty sure. And so, yeah, that's where that came from. But yeah, I didn't know about Plock, and it's kind of sad that I didn't. But one of my favorite composers, other soundtrack is for sure on that 50. I'm pretty sure it is.
Which one's that?
It should be Echo Defender of the Future.
Oh, it
Echo
is on there. It definitely is on there, yeah.
Yeah, and so that composer is Tim Follin along with his brother Jeff Follin, and so yeah, that at least Tim is acknowledged. So we're good in some respect, but yeah.
The one I had to laugh at is because, as we talked about earlier, how people kept saying, oh, your music sounds like video game music. And then what kind of convinced you was someone showed you Castle Crashers to show, like, look, your music kind of sounds like this. And then I laughed, on your top 50 list is Castle Crashers. And I was like, well, that's kind of a shout out to yourself, isn't it?
No, really. My music's not in Castle Crashers. My music said it sounded like Castle Crashers, and that's actually a really good part of the story, is because that's when it solidified in my mind all the way that it was attainable to work in games and at the level I was at for music, because I wasn't looking at the typical console games and AAA games, because I had already, I think around that time I had discovered, no, actually I have it backwards. That was the opening mark of the research when that person had told me that. His friend of mine named Jason, he worked in IT. And when he said that, I said, oh, well, what's this? Because it wasn't something tangible to buy at the store at the time. I believe it was something you could just download. And when it was related that it sounded similar, I was like, wait a minute. So I'm thinking, I'm doing this all by ear at this time. I don't have any current composition training, or I don't remember any type of music theory. It had been years. And so I was like, oh, okay. I think I know now what to do. And so I was like, I'm going to have to go back to school. I'm going to have to learn at the level of these other composers, film and game, to see like where I land. And then I realized I don't want to be in film. I didn't like that scene at all. And I had to choose. And I was thinking, I don't want to be analyzing everything to bits to film. I want to still enjoy some kind of art. So I let that go. And since everyone was always like saying, like, again, this music sounds like it should be in a video game, I just said, this feels right. This feels good. We're just going to go in that direction. I think that was, but yeah, that was the beginning of my mind opening up that is this a career? And that's where it started it.
All right, I'm going to let you go. I do have more questions, but maybe if you're willing, you can come back sometime. And
yeah,
we can get into what's left over here.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to come back. I love your questions.
Thank you.
They're so great.
People can check you out at chasebethea.com. That's ChaseBethea. Twitch.tv/gamercomposer. Anywhere else people should look for you?
Yeah, Spotify, Tidal. If you want to follow me on Twitter as well, or yeah, those are just as good.
Chase Bethea, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it.